Hey guys, Ramsey here. Welcome to another video. Today we have an early impression video on a house that I have never talked about on the channel. So it's a brand new house to the channel, and the house name is Kerosene, and the fragrance we're going to be talking about today is called Copper Skies. Now, I'm going to give myself a fresh kind of application because the opening is so different from what it dries down into, but it's a very brief transition, okay? So what I'm smelling right now will be gone in 30 seconds or a minute. It hits you with something and then it quickly transitions and then it sort of lasts the entire way like that into the dry down. Very, very interesting composition. I'll tell you what, if you're paying close attention in the opening, this fragrance is really something that shocked me a little bit. I wasn't expecting how it started and kind of what it turns into. So for those of you who don't know, John Pegg, or as he was known, John Kerosene, was kind of his nickname. Badass nickname, by the way. But he was one of the very first YouTubers to kind of take his channel from just reviewing fragrances and discussing it into starting his own brand. Now it feels like there's a million YouTuber brand fragrances that are out there. My favorite is Les Abstraits from my good friend Eugene. I think that's the top YouTuber brand. I think that's the top quality fragrances that a YouTuber has ever kind of put out to the market personally. But Kerosene's a house that I would really like to dive into. And I never would have been able to dive into it if not for the foresight and kindness of David, who very kindly sent me a lot of these decants. This is, his handwriting. This is a 5 ml decant from his bottle. And he also sent me some beautiful cigars, which I very much enjoyed smoking and relaxing with. It is Sunday, so it's a very relaxed mood. My life has been like go, 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 go. So taking just a Sunday to just kick back, relax, wear a beautiful fragrance like this, watch a couple TV shows, enjoy the sunny weather. It's beautiful. So, but it wouldn't be happening without the generosity and kindness from you guys. So thank you very much to everyone who has ever sent me anything. I have said this before. I will say it again, though. If you do send me something, please be patient. I mean, I have so many fragrances, it could take me years to kind of get to something that you have sent me. So just please be patient if you send me something. I promise I will get to it at some point. It's just a matter of when. And so let me read you the blurb. Let me read you the blurb on the house since it's a brand new house and I haven't talked about them before. There's only so many days in the year where you can talk about something new. And so yesterday, for example, we had our beautiful interview with Liz Moores of Papillon. She was very generous with her time. She promised me an hour. I think we went over the hour mark. And that was our second interview together. So if you have not watched that, I would urge you to check out the interview with Liz Moores of Papillon. Those interviews with the perfumers are some of my all-time favorite content to put on the channel because you're really hearing it directly from the source, getting her point of view and some of the stories that she shared, talking about, her daughter, talking about, multiple daughters, talking about her horse. The inspiration for her newest fragrance, Epona, which just came out a couple weeks ago, was absolutely brilliant. And so I'm very grateful for some of those perfumers taking the time to come on my very small channel and chat with me. But let me read you the blurb about Kerosene as the brand, because again, John Pegg and his brand is new to my channel. So Kerosene released this fragrance called Copper Skies in 2011. And the note listing is clove, amber, basil, honeycomb, tobacco, and cedar. So here's the interesting facts about the house, if you will. The promising American perfume label Kerosene is one of the niche companies in the fragrance industry because even the career of its founder was unusual. Behind Kerosene is John Pegg, who was born in Detroit, Michigan. Pegg got his first glimpse of the auto industry during his apprenticeship and was immediately fascinated by the various smells. Fuels, sheet metal, grease, PVC, and lubricants excited him as much as the sense of his rugged hometown of nature and earth. It was during that time that the name Kerosene was born. John Pegg, aka Kerosene, started as an influencer reviewing a wide variety of fragrances and perfumes on YouTube. The desire for more quickly followed, and Pegg began creating his own fragrances. He prefers warm, comfortable, and cozy aromas, which this definitely fits that sort of stereotype, if you will, because they contrast with the cold from his homeland, Detroit, Michigan. The man behind Kerosene is an all-rounder who, in addition to the fragrances, also creates the packaging and flacons himself. Using paintbrushes and color sprays, Pegg creates his very own designs that go into each perfume. Pegg himself described his creation by saying, "The result is when a shiny metallic Ford collides with perfume while songs by The Cure echo from the pointy, tiny speakers of the clunky 8-track player." Great little one-liner. In addition to the perfumes, fragrances from Kerosene include beard oil, nail care products, healthcare products, soaps, creams, shower gels, lotions, and complete makeup. Very, very interesting. So here's the thing about this. I alluded to it when I sprayed it, and I can still get it a little bit, but it's already beginning that process, that metamorphosis of shifting. We talked about metamorphosis yesterday when we talked about Liz Moore's Papillon brand with the butterfly, this feeling of the butterfly being metamorphosis from the caterpillar into the beautiful butterfly, right? This fragrance goes through a metamorphosis very, very quickly, okay? I'm talking 1 or 2 minutes. So when you first spray, it opens up with this very hard hit of black licorice, okay? Realistic, bitter, dark, dipped, dripping, boozy, black, tinged anise-like licorice, okay? Maybe one of the most realistic black licorice openings I've ever smelled. I was not expecting that at all, okay? I'll tell you that. That was a little bit of a shock to the system when it first hit me. And so I have about a 5-hour dry down here, and I'll tell you, the differences are staggering between the opening and the dry down. But that very quick, let's just call it the first 5 minutes of the fragrance, is very, very interesting. There's so much going on. For someone who really pays attention and is a hardcore frag head, the opening to the transition to what the fragrance becomes may be my favorite part. But I also really like the dry down, though, so it's hard to say. But unfortunately, that opening doesn't last long. I wish that that sort of weird licorice fenugreek kind of thing, I don't know what you would call it, but I wish it lasted just a little bit longer, even if it was like double the time. Instead of a minute or 2 or 5 minutes, let's say, if it was like 10 or 15 minutes and then the transition happened, it would have been perfect, because I think it would have given more people a time to really pick up on the details in the opening, right? And even while for me, I come back to these licorice kind of fragrances is not something that many people think about. Very few people are like, man, I need a bitter, herbal, strange, black licorice kind of fragrance in my collection. Although I do have one, but it's much more designer. And the black licorice, this is Lolita Lempicka's Eau Masculin, the Eau de Parfum Intense, okay? And so this one is much easier to wear. It also keeps that black licorice all throughout the dry down. This gives you this strange black licorice in the opening and then takes it away. Is what's interesting about Copper Skies, okay? So it kind of shocked me, and to be honest with you, I don't even know if I like it that much as the uniqueness just kind of appeals to me, if that makes sense, okay? This unique, different kind of shock to the system is really what got me, and I was not expecting that. I was expecting it to be this tobacco-y amber, okay? It's ambery tobacco with little hints of cedar and some other things. I was expecting that from what I know of the fragrance, okay? And so what's so interesting is if you listen to that brief quote that John gave about this kind of metallic, silvery Ford crashing with perfume, one of the shiny ones, of course, from the 1950s with all the chromed out, the decked wings in the back and all that stuff, the good old days, man. But there's this weird sense of like 2 spheres colliding with this fragrance in the opening. And at first I was like, wow, this is much wilder than I was expecting. I mean, I knew it was a YouTuber brand, and I also knew that, he was a niche brand, so I'm sure they were willing to do some things that were a little different than designer fragrances. But that opening was wild. It was like a wow kind of shock to the system, but very brief. That brief collision where everything is like vaporized in 5 minutes, let's say, 10 minutes max. Everything just seems vaporized, is kind of not what I was expecting, okay? I was expecting the fragrance that ends up after that collision of 2 spheres, right? What it turns into in the dry down. This soft, hay-like tobacco that's very ambery, honeyed ambery, and almost extremely easy to wear is what I was expecting. What I was not expecting is the little bit of the strange opening, okay? So I don't think enough people who discuss this fragrance talk about the opening, because there is a little bit of this collision factor. There's a little bit of almost 2 bodies coming together, 2 spheres coming together with different smells, but very quickly. And you get that explosion, almost like the force of the explosion blows you back a little bit in the opening, and you're like, wow, this is very interesting and unique, okay? This is a good first fragrance for the brand to discuss on the channel. So As it dries though, once you get into 15, let's just say 15 to 30 minutes in to be safe, okay? Once you hit that 30-minute mark, and I'm already getting it now, it's only been 10 minutes, right? But what ends up happening is all of the kind of wow, shock factor, that feel of like explosion and you being kind of pushed back a little bit, right? Your hair being thrown back from your face, that goes away very, very quickly, okay? And you get this beautiful smell of soft hay and tobacco that feels so very well rounded, okay? It's almost like the two spheres come together, they crash, and then they kind of separate and become two spheres again, and you're left in the sphere with the tobacco and the amber, okay? You were kind of in this one to begin with, they collide, and now you kind of leave in a different sphere. Because the fragrance feels so comforting, and it's obviously instantly the very first thing you will notice if you have experience with kind of different genres of perfumery is that this is a fall fragrance for me. This is like a fall winter type fragrance for people who have to wear fragrances or like to wear fragrances in, let's say, a traditional weather environment, okay? I'm wearing this in August in Texas. It's going to be 100 degrees today, or 90, 99, 98, whatever it's going to be. But my favorite time of year is fall. And so if I only wait to wear this when it's proper, I'll never wear these type of fragrances. But just the way that the notes kind of play off of each other and begin to round itself out, almost like that car is wrecked and then instantly fixed, you know? It's quite beautiful. It's that very unique opening, and you would think the fragrance may be quite challenging. Like when I first applied this for the very first time, I thought, wow, this is going to be way more challenging than I expected. Extremely unique opening. And you would think that that extreme uniqueness may continue into the dry down, okay? But what's crazy is, obviously, there are some notes that I think are very tough for people to swallow in the opening. So, for example, that black licorice smell just may straight up put some people off. Like, if you're the kind of person that sprays, smells, and makes up your mind, and you don't give this fragrance time to develop and show its true colors, you very well may be like, nope, not for me, next. Which is that's not fair. That's not a proper way to kind of test a fragrance. The basil can be very herbaceous, very quite green, little hints of mintiness here and there, and just the freshness of herbs. Imagine you're just, making spaghetti sauce and you add all these different herbs in there. Basil's one of them, and it just adds that aromatic feel to the fragrance. There's definitely some of that in here. And the basil does something very interesting because it almost boomerangs, in the opening it's there, you get the aromatic touches with the weird licorice and all that stuff, but it almost goes away. It almost like recedes into the background and allows some of the tobacco, the amber, the cedar to play, to take the spotlight, if you will. And but what ends up happening is it doesn't stick around, it leaves, but then it almost does this strange boomerang and comes back, okay? Because what ends up happening is late into the dry down, you start getting it again, okay? So you start getting this aromatic basil that kind of comes back around. So there's not really a proper note listing for this fragrance. I think it just lists some notes just straight up, not like in the traditional triangle. So there's clove, there's amber, basil, honeycomb, tobacco, and cedar. But if I were building my own triangle, the basil would be in the top and it would be in the base, because it just feels like it's kind of there and then it's not there in the mid and then it's there again, if that makes sense. So very interesting kind of effect with the herbaceous type notes in here. Now, the other thing that doesn't stick around as much is clove. Interestingly enough, there are some types of basil that can actually give off these clove-like qualities. And I wonder if very curious to see if John Pegg actually played with some of those, qualities of both that may connect, if you will. Wonder if he gave that any consideration. Now, the clove sticks around the longest without sort of disappearing and reappearing, if that makes sense. But the crazy opening almost adds this like kind of warmth, and instantly as everything begins to reform itself, you start to get this feeling of that the fragrance is just going to be extremely warming and spicy, and the clove gives off these little eugenol-like touches, almost like, imagine varnish to like a finished cocktail, okay? The cocktail's there, you add the varnish on top. That's kind of the way that the clove feels in this fragrance, if that makes sense. The main players into the dry down for me, 3 notes: tobacco, amber, and this boozy honey feeling, which I love. I love honey. I love animalic honeys. I love anything with honey. I am a honey fanatic. I love honey in my fragrances. Hugo Boss #1 is famously in my top 10 fragrances of all time. That is like a potential signature scent for me. And John calls this note the honeycomb note. Now, I'm sure there are some technical differences between just honey and having a honeycomb note in there. I actually ate an actual honeycomb once. Costco sold them. I don't know if anyone's ever eaten actual honeycomb with the honey as well. It's a little weird. It's kind of like this transparent, fleshy, kind of chewy thing. And I don't know if I would do it again. I got it because they had it, and I was like, that's kind of weird, you know. But so I'm sure there are some differences here and there. But all I know is you kind of get this honey, boozied honey, ambery thing. And here's what John Pegg basically says about the fragrance, okay? He says, Copper Skies is exactly how amber should be. Sweet, but not overly sweet. Rich, but not headache-inducing. This fragrance is smooth, slightly smoky, earthy, and delectable. Now, I found that interesting that he calls this an amber fragrance straight away, because my brain kept trying to focus on the tobacco, maybe because I love tobacco so much as a note, and tobacco adds this very mystical, evocative. He mentions the smoky qualities in here, and while, yes, I could see little wisps of smoke occasionally, I was thinking more like tobacco hanging up in a barn curing kind of thing, you know? Not the green, fresh tobacco, but the brown tobacco that's kind of sat and cured and hung upside down and all that stuff. That's really the feeling that the tobacco gave me in this fragrance. And I think, like I said, I think it's a perfect first scent from the brand to kind of discuss on the channel, because John Pegg, being very open about the fact that he's living in Michigan, he grew up in Michigan, he was born in Detroit, you know, growing up in the north of the United States. I'm in the south in Texas, but he grew up where it's basically cold. And sometimes I really envy him for that, especially when it's 100 degrees out, but here in Texas. But I think this is a great first fragrance to discuss on the channel, because this warm, spicy combo seems to be like a style of fragrances that John Pegg really likes using in his perfumes. And although if I only wore them, like I said, when weather allowed it, I would never wear these type of fragrances, but like a couple months a year. So just imagine, the best way to think about this fragrance for me is kind of through this imagery, right? So just imagine lots of cinnamon or lots of nutmeg working as the final touch, like while drinking a glass of eggnog, or having like a port wine and putting some cinnamon on top. I know that's verboten, but just so I can say, imagine the imagery, okay? Imagine the port wine note in Burberry London for men, right? There's a little bit of this. It's almost like imagine the port wine, but imagine it maybe in the color of like this golden image. Like that's the color that you will have to imagine for the image to properly make sense. Because if you think about probably it's the addition of the honey adding this golden kind of hue to everything. But if you think about kind of the color of whiskeys or cognacs, but just keep it in line with that theme of spices, tobacco, plants growing in the fields, you know, being harvested and hung up in the barn on the side to kind of cure, that kind of thing. Tractor rides back and forth to the corn maze. Perfect image of kind of Copper Skies to me. So first it kind of surprises you with that shock opening, that crash. Then it almost surprises you with the exact opposite reason. This is the best kind of way I could describe the fragrance. It surprises you with that shock opening, and then it surprises you for the exact opposite reason, that it becomes such a cozy, wearable fragrance. So it does exact opposite things. It surprises you with how crazy the opening is, and it kind of surprises you with how likable and wearable the dry down is. Now, most people are going to get the dry down, and I'm sure, you know, this is the only time I've worn it as my scent of the day. I did wear it to bed once before, but I've never worn it as my scent of the day until today. So I can't really tell you longevity, but it seems like this thing's going to be one of those, you know, cold weather scents that kind of seems to last forever. Very cozy, wearable ambers, okay? Or ambery tobacco if you prefer. Now, is there a copper smell to this fragrance? That's what I think I keep thinking about because of the name. And I think if it wasn't for Copper Skies, the name, and if John Pegg didn't talk so much about his metallurgical work, it may not come to mind. But if you think about the color of this cup, okay, and I don't use props very often, so please enjoy. But imagine the color of this cup. Imagine it's Halloween time, the weather's starting to cool, and just imagine this mystical, mystery spiced kind of wine or alcoholic drink in here that's, got the cinnamon, nutmeg, clove, varnish, basil, a sprig of basil, let's say, on the side, and you're holding it in your hand. The sky is overcast, but the sun is kind of giving the clouds that sort of reddish, pinkish sort of tint, if you will, okay? So the sun is kind of giving the sky a little bit of fire look in the air, but the sky is overcast. It's just cold enough and nippy enough to kind of want to wear a jacket. The kids are running around at the pumpkin patch, and the tobacco and crinkly hay is in the background. And then once you drop the kids off at home with the wife, you and your boys go out and have a cigar or two. And that golden ambery warmth, that golden hue, the jacket you're wearing and the feeling of this fragrance seem to just keep you warm, right? And even the spiced kind of drink you're drinking, whatever. But it definitely has this weird boozy alcoholic touch that is not listed, okay? And it gives the ambery a boozy touch to it as well. That is the feeling of Copper Skies to me. If I were to kind of have you close your eyes and just really imagine the fragrance. Now, while your eyes are closed, imagine like the oxidation of metal. Like imagine that this kind of bronze-looking, copper-looking cup, imagine that it's being slightly oxidized. Maybe it's got little rust pieces building all over it. And then just imagine this kind of color of metal inside of some old abandoned warehouse in Detroit, since we're talking about Detroit earlier. And that's where America's automobile manufacturing base was before it got gutted and shipped overseas. But just think of the metals that you would find in some old abandoned factories. Think of an old like Packard factory from back in the day, and it's got rust on the metals. That is kind of the background story of Copper Skies. The front story is the amber, tobacco, cedar combination. That very wearable, very cozy. This is one of those fragrances that would be perfect if you were like staying in and it was cold outside, you had the fire on, you were with your loved one, you were with your person, you just want to kind of have a night in and just chill and that kind of thing, just be cozy and let it be cold outside and you're warm inside kind of thing. That is a perfect kind of representation of Copper Skies for me. Definitely think of the color of my shirt, that brown with the bronze. Those two colors kind of come to mind while I smell this. Now, even though I think all kerosene fragrances are marketed as unisex, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think they are. This one to me leans masculine because of the tobacco, because of the way that tobacco is used here. I always associate tobacco with masculine perfumery, but just imagine kind of a blue collar man working with his hands. He's got calluses on his hands from working and lifting things and all that stuff. And again, I don't believe in gender in perfumery. I think anyone can wear anything, anytime. But the image of kind of a man working at the factory in the good old days before machines kind of took over and seemed to do everything, that is what instantly comes to mind with this one. So that is kind of my take on it for an early impression. This is kind of one of those where I think if I didn't have so many fragrances to choose from already, I could easily see something like this being added to the collection. And it's very well done. So shockingly well done for someone who I don't think has any formal training in perfumery. I will say that as well. I was very curious to see how everything kind of came together, because some self-taught perfumers seem to be able to blend better than others, but this was very, very well done. And I think he shocked me with both the shock of the intensity and the strangeness of that opening, which I was not expecting, and also the smoothness of the dry down and the wearability and what it turns into. So John Pegg, very well done. Again, I'm very late to the party, as always, as I always am. I'll always be late to the party. I'm never one to go rush out the review first thing. Well, it's just, kind of one of those things for me. But sometimes I get to talk about new stuff, but most of the time, many, many other people have talked about a fragrance before I put up a review on it. But as always, I love hearing your thoughts. Thank you to everyone who joined the live stream. We may very well do another live stream in the next day or two, and it's going to be a blind sniff episode. Noah very kindly put together this blind sniff kind of package for me, so that should be fun. So more live streams to come. I love it when you guys can join and kind of participate and all that stuff. The back and forth is awesome. Even if you can't, just leave a comment in the video. Let me know what you thought. Let me know your thoughts if you've had a chance to smell it and all that good stuff. So as always, cheers guys. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Bye-bye.